All right, I hope you all have had a great time tonight. Has it been a good meetup so far? I was expecting more. Can we try it again? Has it been a good meetup so far? All right. Well, good. It's always a good sign when it takes forever to get everyone back. That means you're really enjoying each other. We'll give you some more time here at the end. You've already met our three speakers. I should introduce this person right here. This is Zeno. He's the CEO of Resend, and so we invited him as well to join the panel here. I'm going to give you a chance to ask them questions. It can be anything about anything you want, all right, around DevTools. But let's start with just a real basic one, and I've already told them they don't all need to answer everyone necessarily, but this one they do. So I'm going to give them a quick round where they're all just going to give us a lightning round of a dev tool that they've really enjoyed using recently. There's one stipulation. It cannot be their own dev tool, all right? We're not going to pitch your own dev tools here, but another dev tool. In the meantime, if you have a question, we have a few people with mics. Let's see. Where is Victor? Oh, okay. We have Zé over here and Victor over here. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand, that way we're ready as soon as they're done with the next question, okay? But let's start first of all, favorite dev tool, lightning answers.
Well, I really love Ghostty. It's hard not to bring that up, right? Who uses Ghostty? Yeah, it's just so fast, and I love that. But I've also been really enjoying Cubic for PR reviews. We've tried a lot of tools, and that's the one that we've been enjoying the most.
Recent, no. Resend is good, but what have I been using recently? Oh, actually, yeah, I've been trying to move all of my databases to something more modern recently, so I've started using Convex a lot. That's been pretty cool. Yeah. No, Neon's still based as hell. I use that for a lot of things, but it's just super based that I have a problem with. But no, Convex is pretty sick because it's got, when you're developing locally, it like spins up a sort of ephemeral like dev server in the cloud, so you don't need to worry about managing multiple environments and stuff like that. It's pretty sick.
Yep. No, Convex is awesome. Stripe launched something today. Agents have always been really good at writing code, but then they're like, now I need a database URL, or can you sign into Neon and give me the database URL, right? So like the actual provisioning of infrastructure has always been unsolved. And Stripe launched Stripe Projects today, projects.dev, where they solve all of this for you. It's the new Agentic protocol. If you haven't checked it out, you should.
I'll say UV. I'm not a Python developer. I had to learn more Python. Well, I let Codex write the Python. But like as a JavaScript developer, like it gives me sort of the user experience that I wish I had. All along in Python. I would have probably been more of a Python developer. Definitely not a hardcore Python developer, no offense. But at least more of a.
All right, I think we got our mics working as well. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand so we can make sure to take questions from the audience. Otherwise, I can just ask them my own questions, but then you would just be watching me ask them questions that I want to know the answers to. So can you help me? Questions you have right over here, Zé?
Anyone but this guy.
Oh, this one really works. So I guess my question is around standardization. Like Andre mentioned, a new protocol. There's like SkillsMD, all this stuff. But the models themselves are changing. Like when GPT-5 came out, it had like rewrite our prompts. Claude is like quite different than GPT. How does standardization look in the future if models keep diverging?
I think it's a good question. Honestly, I think like collaboration is very important for us to figure out some of these things because and like adaptability, the reality is some of these updates are also going to become increasingly cheaper for us to do, right? Like if formats sort of change, but yeah, I think we just got to collaborate, but also the reality is at times we're going to diverge just to figure out what works best, right? So like skills.md, like agent skills is like generally standardized, but then like some special sauce that like Claude puts in, some special sauce that like we put in, depending on sort of like what the harness works on best. But I think like having some ground layers that everyone plays nicely with is helpful.
I'm not going to take a guess at either the next 3 months because it's all going to be wrong. But I have noticed a pattern of the tooling and the things that we put around these models are split. They're more successful when we inject them directly into the model rather than give the model tools to be able to access that data. So for example, obviously Agents MD, Claude MD, all of the MD files for like top level rules, right, have been extremely successful. MCP was a bit on the fence. It's still a bit touch and go, but that's because the agent has to reach out and try to get that information, right? Skills, on the other hand, has been incredibly successful because, again, you're just injecting that knowledge directly into the agent. So I feel like there is a pattern of like the closer that you can get knowledge to the implementation of the agent, the more successful it will be. But I also don't know what I'm talking about, so.
Hey, so just a general question for all of you guys. How in your tools are you currently tracking agentic usage, and what agents are choosing to use or not to use your product and when? And like how changes to your documentation, your GEO, or how you are presenting yourself to humans and agents is affecting that?
I can start. We've been trying every tool that comes out. Profound is a big one. There are a couple tools from YC, and I really like them. But there's always the thing that's missing is like, okay, you're telling me how much of my traffic is coming from each model, which is great. But what do I do now? There's always that question of, okay, give me a checklist. Like I was really excited to check Andre's checklist because of that. Like I miss having something that's more tangible. So you have to keep using all of them, trying them and all that. And there are a couple of studies that are coming out too. Like there was a research, there was like a third party, it's like just a random person. I think it's called Amplify. And then they tested like 3,000 prompts across different verticals. And then for Resend specifically, we were recommended by Claude 62% of the times for, if you just tell like, I want to send an email, help me implement that. So that's really cool. And then it changes depending on the model. So you want to track that. But still, like, okay, now I want to go from 62 to 70. How do I do that? I have no idea. And I really want that answer. And I ask a lot of people, no one knows. But you got to keep investing. Like we were chatting earlier, like we just have to keep trying it.
Yeah, and I would add it's all changing so quickly right now that like setting up something that could help you long term is not really feasible, right? Like it's more try to work off first principles and your gut feeling and taste, and then just hope that works, right? And for the most part, it does. One thing that recently we tried was, we talked with the people from 27.dev, like Agent Arena, and they shared like their evals and how they tested Neon. And one thing that was really funny there was like, oh yeah, 0 errors, really good agent experience, no doc lookups at all. It's like, okay, so agents just like literally vibe code Neon without even consulting the Neon doc. So like, how can you possibly affect the result if they don't even talk to you at all, right? Like it's just like in their training data. So yeah, I feel like it's still changing really quickly. Trying to reach the users as early as possible and just inject the skills and MCP servers into the system with like wizards and init flows, I think is like a good starting point that we're trying out right now.
Profound is awesome. You should definitely check that out. I also met a new friend from the prompting company. So if you do want to talk about this with my man afterwards, he's a good person to talk to.
So my question is for all of you. What do you guys think of authentication for coding agents, and how would you go about solving it? I know he mentioned about Stripe's project.dev and projects.dev, but one of the things that they are doing, as per my understanding, is they are linking it with your account and not creating a new account for the coding agent, which is not flexible again. I'm curious about your guys' opinion on that.
I think some of it very much depends on like what is the responsibility that you also want to attach to this, right? So like, for example, like if Codex opens a PR for you, like it's still your PR, right? Like you asked to open it. So like how often do you actually want like an account on behalf of the agent versus like still acting on behalf of the person who kicked off whatever the agent is doing. So like I think this is actually one of the places where like MCP has a much stronger answer than like, chaining together a bunch of CLI scripts. Is like it comes with OAuth, which is already like an authentication standard that is for acting on behalf, like an application acting on behalf of a user. So I think we're going to see some of those things continue to iterate. So like, for example, with the plugins that we launched today, like a big part of that was bringing in the same like ChatGPT apps connectors, and all of them use like OAuth 2.1 so that like you can authenticate with, Slack, for example, and it will say that this was posted by, like you with Codex, for example.
It is kind of interesting though, right? Like the concept of, I think AWS has like service accounts or something.
Yeah.
Like if you were to apply that same concept to agents, it's like you have most of the responsibilities. You just can't do like admin level, like delete my account type stuff. That would be kind of interesting to explore. This is a work talk now, by the way. This is not a Q&A. We're just discussing work. We're discussing the roadmap.
Yeah, what I've found is that I keep coming back to the foundation more and more, to the basics. So when we started Resend, was like, hey, we need a way for folks to just call the API. So here's some API keys, you go run with it, right? And we try to make it very basic when it comes to scopes and permissions, and that was by design. Let's not make it complex. There's a read or there's a write type of permission. Now we're like, okay, we want to build a Slack bot, and now we want to build a CLI. And we can just pass an API key that works, but it's not the right interface. So we're like, okay, we actually really need OAuth. We actually really need granular permissions. That's actually very important. So RBAC, OAuth, and even like protocols like Skim for account provisioning, which in the past you feel like, yeah, that's just like an enterprise requirement. No. Like if you want to integrate with Stripe and Lovable and V0, like you're gonna need those things because no one wants to go to another service, create an account. Yeah, your agent will do that for you. So
You don't want your agent to live on while you got fired?
So my question is mainly for you, Zeno. With the coding agents getting really good, there's this sort of like commodification of software that's happening right now. How do you as a dev tools provider, I guess to put it bluntly, expect to survive?
expect to survive? That's a great question. That study that I brought up, the Amplify one, so it would go in every single vertical, right? So it will check off and email and feature flags. So then you would expect, yeah, for feature flags, it's probably going to bring up launch darkly or post hog, and they were not doing great at all. In fact, Claude would much rather build their own feature flagging with Redis and everything for caching than trying to use something off the shelf. So when I saw that, of course, I was like, okay, that's tricky, right? I feel like every SaaS now is in a tricky position because of how easy it is to code, how cheap it is. We've been seeing that in our own personal use of AI. But I feel like infrastructure companies are actually in a great spot. Like we've never grown as fast as we're growing now because those the fundamentals needs to be in place. So yeah, I feel like there's always going to be space for infrastructure. I'm not as confident that will always be space for the SaaS layer.
Preparing yourself for the React email resend slop fork.
I have a question. So I think all of us come from a more command line, API-driven type of interaction. But one of the things I'm very curious about is if you're seeing anybody doing something very interesting in a more UI interaction with AI and agents. Yeah, if you know any projects are doing something cool there, I'll be curious.
Want to talk about JSON renderer?
You can talk about it. No, anyway. Okay, all right. I mean, yeah, Vercel does a lot of exploration into like how the intersection of like the end user experience and AI, and that's most of the stuff that I was working on while I was there. So, for example, I've noticed a lot of registries coming up nowadays from different places. So obviously there was the one that I showed, which was AI Elements. 11 Labs, the speech and transcription one, they have their own as well, where it's like there are components that you can use to put almost like a face on the model, right? So it feels very alive when you're chatting to it. That's one exploration that we did. Another one was, JSON render and the generative UI part of the AI SDK. So effectively what we were exploring is, can you put custom interfaces and custom components in and string that with custom information from an LLM? So there's a couple of different ways that we were exploring this. One of them was like you effectively server render JSX as part of the tool call, and then it just stringifies that and then sends it back as like a HTML element into the DOM. Another one that Andre mentioned was JSON render, which I haven't played with too much, but it's the concept that the LLM can render a JSON like Zod based sort of schema JSON thing into the front end, but then we can pick up on that and then render it properly, like match it up with again, probably JSX or whatever, So yeah, some interesting stuff happening.
Hey, I'm actually from 2027 to Dev. Thanks, Andre, for mentioning us. But I have a question to Dominic. As somebody from coding agent side, like how much do you think the coding agent plus SaaS, or SDK, CLI, API integration, how much do you think this is responsibility for coding agents and model providers or the SaaS itself? Like how easy it is for agents to use the tool?
I think it depends. So I think the reality is it also depends on the gravity of the application that you already have, right? So if it's if you're already a SaaS company that has a lot of customers, a lot of users, you're gonna have an easier time to convince model providers, whether it's Codex, ChatGPT, or Claude, it's others, to have integrations with your stuff. Versus if you're a startup, I think it becomes significantly more important for you to figure out what are all of those interfaces, those APIs, or MCPs, etc., that you want to provide, and how well do they work with coding agents. So providing plugins like Neon is, for example, becomes increasingly more important versus if you're Google Drive or something, you're probably in a slightly better situation than a new up and coming company.
Hi, so my question is, how many coding agents are you guys running at the same time? How are you leveraging these so many agents and automations?
I can go first because I'm a caveman. I run Cursor because I get that for free at Databricks, and I just have one agent at a time. Maybe I have 2 projects open. The one thing that I do that is maybe a little special is I don't open a project. I open the folder where all my projects are in, and then I kind of in 3,000 miles view meta, look at this and do it here and over this, right? Just point between repos. That's been working pretty well. But one agent at a time. I don't have the mental capacity to do more.
I think since the pre-Codex app, I would have 1 or 2. Since the Codex app, I treat it more like Slack. So I have I think roughly normally 2 or 3 agents running at all times, and then maybe 6, 7 projects I'm working on at the same time, plus automations. But I also have unlimited tokens, so how do we get that? OpenAI.com/careers. Also, Thibaut just hit the reset button, so
Yeah, if I don't say Codex, I get put on a performance improvement plan. So, no, it's so prior to this, back Vercel was very Claude pilled. So it's we would, I would have maybe 3 terminals max, as in a split view in the terminal max running Claude code. But it's very hands-on. Whereas I think it's shifted a lot, not so much with OpenAI, but with the Codex app, because I can open all of the repos that I have, and then I can just work trees is especially the thing that really, moved the needle on me for this. But like start up all of these threads for each of them, and then I don't have to worry about like a busy interface or whatever because they're all just running on the side.
Yeah, one thing that really clicked for me on a personal level is when I started to understand the power of context and the power of like humanizing the agent. So when OpenClaw came up, I was like, okay, let me put my OpenClaw to work. And I tried coding a few things. I tried like signing up for Resend, and then it didn't. And then I created the account manually. I'm like, okay, now I can sign in. And of course it didn't. And now I'm like, okay, let me just remove CAPTCHA from the signing page because, like agents should be able to log in, that kind of stuff. And then internally, I started like a marketing one. So the team knows Hermes, which is the name of our agent, and it codes, it reviews PRs, but it's focused on marketing tasks. And then from that, it grew to another one for sales, and then another one for infrastructure, another one for DevOps. And now we have like several ones that actually code, but they live on Slack as humans would. They're part of a team. Even on GitHub, they belong to a certain team under the organization. So they have their own GitHub account and so on. So that has been interesting. I don't think it's perfect. We actually get very, very annoyed. Vitor yells at them at all times. But it's an interesting experiment. I would invite everyone to try that out.
So we use reasoning agents, you use resending agents.
You've been waiting all evening to do that.
Holding it in. It's good. I've been bursting to say that one.
Hi, I had a question about logging when agents are basically using your own credentials to log into accounts. How do you guys think about tracking and like making sure that you know when an agent is signing in on behalf of a user when they're using the exact same credentials?
Yeah, it's a good one. I feel like this is like the kind of questions you get once you arrive at the enterprise specifically, right? It's like, this is all nice, like C-Life, like, how about like governance, right? I feel like there's not a good answer just yet. I think as I mentioned in my talk, the one thing that MCP does, which is really well, right? Like you can put it behind a proxy. You can, like, Databricks has a registry for MCP servers. Every big like enterprise platform has a registry. Docker has. Did you guys know that Docker has a registry for MCP servers? I didn't. And I think this is like still something that's being explored. BetterAuth just released like a protocol in that direction. I haven't actually looked at it, so I can't speak to that. But I feel like it's still like giving agents context is kind of solved now. Giving agent tools is kind of solved now. And I think this year, giving agents permissions or like how to figure that out is like something that probably we will see a lot of new protocols and stuff.
I think the interesting thing there is also that like, this goes back to what you were talking about with like scoping and like granular permissions, right? Like there's like in the email case, for example, I used to talk about this a lot prior to joining OpenAI. Like you might want your agent to send like an email or two. Do you want your like, agent to be able to send like a couple of 100 or 1,000 emails like in a row in like a split second because it ended up accidentally in a loop? Like probably not. So I think like you even need, like I think this is sort of where like OAuth comes in, but also like really sort of having like new levels of scoping where you want to have more granular control of like how much do you actually want them to do, not just accessing a resource, but like potentially doing different rate limiting or other things like that.
Yeah, you mentioned using agents for DevOps, but like this idea in general of like you preset access to the agent to let it do something, but then you discover you wanted to do something else. Like how do you manage the constantly shifting permissions of the agents in general? Because you want to keep them being productive, but at the same time you don't want to give them like keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, because I was the first one at the company to start up those agents, and because I have access to all the systems, I can provision everything, right? And it takes a lot of time. It's like onboarding a new employee. Like you have to go through all these things and and give access. And those tools change every month because you're adopting new tools. But yeah, what I've found is like, if you're treated as a human, that's how it feels like. Yeah, you put them in a group within your user management tool, and then you try to give them as much access as you can up front for like that infra agent. So it has access to Datadog, and then when an instant is created for instant.io, it jumps into the conversation. So you can check logs on Vercel. It has all the repos cloned, so then you can compare to the code base. So that helps. The more context and the more access you can give up front, the better.
Hello. So I have a question around agent skills. So I know there's a recent project on evaluating those skills, like skill bench, to how they are performing in the real life environment. So my question is first, how do you see the future evolvement of agent? For example, are they self-evolving, or are they cross-effect each other, like a skill link? Did they interact with each other? And second question is, wondering, is there any possibility to build business that make money around agent skill? Right now, it's like markdown files, particularly tasks are very good, but are there chances to build a business around the agent skills?
I think so. I mean, people build businesses around ShadC and UI components. So I just think like skills are an incredibly good way of distilling the very specific knowledge of, like, obviously we use them for like technology and stack choices and whatever. But if you're a person with a very particular skill set and a very specific set of knowledge, you can absolutely like bake that into a skill and then potentially sell that. So that's kind of an interesting thing. In terms of like linking skills, I mean, I think I have heard a lot of chatter, we'll say, that plugins are going to evolve to be more interdependent, interconnected, so to speak. So it's like you might have a plugin which is more of a bundle of skills, maybe not all by the same company, but it would be interesting to explore if you have loose skill files. It's like some from Vercel, Convex, whatever, if they can like have a way to talk to each other. It's kind of cool.
Even just at one company, right? This is interesting, where like Vercel has so many libraries and SDKs that are not really interconnected, but like they could totally or should totally reference each other, right? So like figuring this out is definitely something that's interesting. Like the Neon skill tries to explain you how to work with the documentation and like highlight the best features we have, and then deep links into the docs. But we also have some features like Auth. Not every project should have Neon Auth, but some projects would benefit from it, right? So like, how do you highlight this? And then how do you tell the agent to load the Neon Auth skill specifically and that kind of stuff? I feel like this is still very unexplored.
Hello, guys. I wanted to ask, what do you guys think the future of marketing dev tools looks like? I know that like ChatGPT, for example, might start marketing on there. I think they hired some new advertising person. But the point here is, what do you guys think that's going to look like? Folks like myself are trying to market, so.
I'm not trying to get fired in my first week, so you can take the OpenAI questions.
I didn't feel like this was like specifically an OpenAI question, but like, I mean, I think a lot of things are gonna change, like even for us, sort of like, one of the things that my team thinks about is like, how do we equip developers to like use the OpenAI APIs, right? And so like, I think we're gonna get increasingly to a point where inspiring the users is gonna like play a big role, right? Like in the past, it was sort of this like, how do I create as many sample apps as I can for every possible language? But the reality now is like, sample apps were always this weird thing where you had to like scope it down to like the bare minimum so that someone else can like peruse your code and then like copy paste the lines out and try to jank them into their app. And now that's just a prompt, right? Like, and you can like have one prompt that works in like the multiple languages and frameworks, and you don't have to create any of that. So I think you're going to get increasingly more into like, how do you actually like inspire people of like what you can do with your tools? And like that is going to help, because then you're getting to a point where if the user sits in front of an agent and is asking to do something, like they're going to ask to use a specific technology. For example, the other part is trust, right? So like, with like in email, like trust is a big part, right? Like your entire value prop, like that's a thing you don't want to roll yourself. I think in a similar way, like how do you build trust as a dev tool so that like people will gravitate to yours and like will ask the agent or install your skill. So I think those like inspiration and trust are two big parts.
I think this also comes back to what we were talking about before, where there's certain tools that help you measure where you're kind of at right now, like in relation to your competition and stuff like that. So I think they're good observability mechanisms, right? For it's like, they're not marketing so much as like the marketing that has been taken out of your hands, where are you sitting in that? But I think there's a lot of room for those tools or even other tools in the space to help, kind of like what you were saying, right? Like, how do I actually modify that? How do I move the needle on it?
Yeah, when I think about companies, I try to think about this idea of innovation tokens and how many innovation tokens you have available for you, how many innovation tokens each department has available for them. I feel like engineering or like the infrastructure team, they have very few innovation tokens. When it comes to queues and caching and managing servers, you should be as boring as you can. Marketing, on the other hand, it has 100 innovation tokens that they can spend. They should be playing with everything that comes out and seeing what sticks, right? So you have to be operating at two different speeds, even within like the same company. But in the end, that point about inspiring really connected with me. We try to build something that is so good, but so good that you have to talk about it. And building something that is good is one thing. Building something that inspires others to copy and to build their own version of that, that's extremely hard. And it's so easy for every one of us now to just build the average. We can do that in a single shot prompt. But to do something that really takes it to the next level, that's really hard. And that will be more and more important now that it's so easy to get to the average.
I think to very briefly like close up on like one example, like I used to be a DevRel for Twilio, and like one of the moments that like stuck with me was like a sales person in Germany not really understanding what we were doing until one day he comes to me and is like, I finally understand what you're doing. I'm talking to a customer right now and their CEO is like, I don't know why, but my CTO says you guys are awesome and I have to buy you. And like that part, like that's the kind of situation I want to create where like you might actually be the CEO and you tell your agent like, this is awesome, you should use it. But it might also be like the reality if you're selling to an enterprise, like there's still someone who's gonna slide the credit card, right? Like the engineers don't have like unlimited budget to sign up for things. And so like some of those things like are still gonna be important.
All right, I would love to keep going all night, but here's the best part. We still have time to chat together tonight, but can we thank the 4 panelists up here? Thank you. If you all want to, you can have a seat.